Greetings, Race community. Brent coming in live from the home office in Narragansett, Rhode Island, and I am thrilled to host a fellow New Englander on today's show. Though he has been out of the region for some time, I want to welcome Brian O'Rourke, who's the Vice President for Development and Alumni Relations at Clemson University. Welcome, Brian.
It's good to be here. And I just got to let you know, it was just 2 weeks ago. I was up in Newport, Rhode Island for a family wedding and had an absolute ball. So it was good to get my Yankee roots back moving forward again.
It is hard to beat a wedding in Newport. That is for sure. I was just over there for a friend's birthday party a couple of weeks ago, and we've had a spectacular late fall, sort of early fall, late summer weather, and it's just good to be here. So I got to ask you, like most kids growing up in Massachusetts, you decided to go to Clemson University for undergraduate. Okay. Who were you in high school? What was that guy into? And what led you to Clemson, Brian?
When I was high school, I was the manager of the football team, the basketball team, the baseball team. The athletic abilities were with all my siblings.
Which high school was this, Brian?
I went to Hanover High, just up right between Boston and Plymouth Rock. And so back then, when they recruited someone from my hometown to play basketball, the coach came into the locker room and I was cleaning up, and he said, "Listen, if your good friend Keith comes to Clemson, why don't you come with him? You can be the manager, and we'll give you a scholarship and you can travel with the team." Well, I went home that night and told my mom and dad about it. My dad said, "Say that word again." I said, "Scholarship." He said, "You're going," because I was like the third in a row to have to go to college. And my mother said, "You're not going south to go to college." Well, conversations moved forward. They recruited my good friend Keith. I went down as a package deal, arrived at Clemson in August of 78, sight unseen, never stepped on campus. And my career started as a student, graduate student at Clemson. And now I've had some stops along the way, but been back about 16 years running their alumni and development program. So great story.
So never been on campus. Mm-hmm. You show up and walk me through the first week. There's not a lot of kids from the South Shore going to Clemson that year, would be my guess. Maybe I'm wrong, but tell me what it was like to be the Yankee in that incoming class.
That year there were two of us from the state of Massachusetts. My friend, they recruited myself, and then there was a young lady from Maine. That was it. For example, this past year at Clemson, we have 103 freshmen from the state of Massachusetts. So the brand really expanded. I went in there and it was a true culture change. The weather was tough, and it took me a while to adjust. And I went home after a month and I actually said, "I don't know if this is right for me." And my dad said, "Finish the semester, and if not, you can come home." My whole family was Holy Cross, Boston College. You come back, go to school here. And then October 15th, a day I'll never forget. That's when basketball season officially started. And from that day on, I never looked back because it was the Clemson basketball family and the extended Clemson family that took you in and had you for holidays or had you over for weekends. And that's when the DNA of Clemson, or the culture of Clemson, just took me in. So after October 15th of 78, I didn't look back, and I knew it was at the right place.
Love that. And so when you think about the student experience, I mean, you sort of had the student athlete experience, even though you weren't playing directly. I mean, being a manager is probably the one spot on the team that's more time intensive than being a player at times. And so I'd love to just know some of the highlights, lowlights, just memorable experiences during those 4 years.
Yeah, we were always there before the team was to get the locker rooms ready, help tape the ankles, get them ready. And then after the practice, they were done. We had to clean up and get ready for the next day. So a lot of hours. The one thing it did for me is during basketball season, I was much more structured and disciplined. I actually had better grades during that time. At that time, unfortunately, some of our seasons were a little bit shorter than we liked. We went to the NCAA, the ACC tournament, and we didn't do very well in those many of the years. So, we always were home by spring break. But no, the structure of basketball season helped make me a better student. And then just the networking opportunities it gave me to meet supporters of the basketball team. You'd meet with the alumni board members and board of trustees. It just gave me fabulous exposure to some very special people and lifelong friends. And so not just with the basketball team, but people outside of the team as well. So a lot of hours.
You mentioned it, and I read in advance that you were a recipient of a scholarship. I believe specifically it's called IPTE. Is that right? And so sometimes I ask folks who are in advancement leadership positions, when did you really understand that there was a business of advancement, that fundraising was a career path? And in your case, you were a beneficiary out of the gates, the package deal, the scholarship. Did you understand what that meant at the time, Brian? Or, when along the journey did it start to click that, hey, the financial support of all of these, amazing people, these fans that I'm getting to meet is why I'm here right now?
Yeah. I would say it was probably my sophomore year. We used to have an IPTE invitational tournament. And I remember having dinner with the president of the IPTE, a legend guy by the name of Charlie Bussey at that time. And he told me how it worked, that, IPTE, which is the oldest athletic fundraising organization in the country. It used to stand for I pay 10 a year, then I pay 20, then I pay 30. Now it's just IPTE. I'll be honest, it's a little bit more now if you want good parking, etc. But he shared with me that the membership is the ones who provide the scholarships for us and allow that to do. So it was at a young age that I learned that others gave me the opportunity to have. And it truly helps me share my story because I was a beneficiary and I left college, without any academic debt at all.
Love that. And so you obviously were immersed with basketball and I know other activities during college. What was your immediate path and when did you think about the career path that could be what it is here in advancement?
When I graduated graduate school, right out of undergraduate school, it's like I wasn't ready to leave. So good friends, it said, go to graduate school. And I worked in the housing world. And I thought I wanted to go down the path of student affairs. And so after I graduated, I said, can I go down the path of student affairs? Then I had a friend who I graduated with said, come back, let's get out time to get in the real world and have a good job and be a salesman. So I had a chance to go into the sales. And then the Alumni Association posted this job. And I said, I'm going to go for it. And they hired two of us. They hired this lovely young lady from Greenville, South Carolina, Bonnie, who's still one of my best friends. And they said, we're going to take a chance on this Yankee. And when I got hired, some guy came up and said, our alumni base must be changing if we're putting an alumni from Massachusetts on our alumni staff. And so I interviewed there, and that's where the career kicked off as an alumni relations. I worked with all the Clemson clubs, structuring our current, very similar to the current Clemson club structure we have today. I worked with the Student Alumni Council, which was one of the best joys I had. And you look back where some of those kids are today, and you were their advisor, president of the Texan Houstons, or, serves as VP for John Hancock. Great, successful people who are now our alumni, getting involved in Clemson, serving on boards and being donors back to the university. So it's been so rewarding to be part of those young kids' lives. And now they're volunteer leaders at the university. So for us, our path to cross again has been really exciting and rewarding.
You must occasionally run into people where it's been, 20, 30 years and you reconnect. That's got to be really rewarding.
Saturday at our football game, I'm driving my golf cart around and I saw one of the former students from that time. And I said, Tom, oh my God, I haven't seen you in years. And he just rattled off some of the stories and some of the programming we did when he was in the Student Alumni Council. It's like we hadn't missed a beat. He said, I'm getting ready to retire. I'm building a house in the lake. So we've got to connect here soon again. And I said, I know you're about to retire and you need to get back active in Clemson. But yeah, it's always those stories and connecting. And now it's the next generation. These kids are coming to Clemson. And so during the admissions process, they're calling and we're reconnecting back then. So I never thought I'd be around long enough to see kids who I was their advisors, kids be coming to Clemson now.
So tell me about the path. I know you started in the mid 80s in that alumni relations role. Have you been at Clemson the whole time? Were there twists and turns along the way?
Honestly, after 5 years in the alumni world, loved it, but something told me I needed to grow up and grow and leave. And when I told my dad that, he said, I think it's about time. I think you're at the point you can actually pay your own airfare to come home and visit for Thanksgiving. And so now it was time for me to grow. And so I went into healthcare fundraising for a Catholic health system that was based in Greenville, South Carolina, but it was a national healthcare system called the Franciscan Sisters of the Poor. And I had a chance to interview there, and I was going from the alumni side to the development side. So they were taking a risk on me. And I think that's what really set me to be goal oriented, focused, and driven. Is they've never had a foundation or a real strong fundraising program. And they're saying, you need to lead it, you need to build it. And that was a great 11 years for me personally, where I met my wife. She was the head nurse in the OR. Again, lifelong friends, traveled missions programs around the world. So for me, it was great for me to leave Clemson and grow and go to my own, like I did when I first went to Clemson. I knew no one there. Then I got into healthcare fundraising and I had to build it again. And so great opportunity for me to do that. Then after 11 years of raising money for the health system, I went into fundraising consulting. Time for something new. Went with a great company. It was called Corporate Development.
Brian, before we dive into that, I am just curious, when you start, you're the manager of the basketball team, you're all in on Clemson, you are now working in that alumni context, you know the lingo, you know the culture, you know the people. Even if you still got a little bit of the Massachusetts accent, you're in at this point.
Right.
And then you transition to a healthcare environment where you don't know anybody. The mission is different. The affinity, if you will, is very different. I'm just curious, for those of us who haven't had much exposure in the healthcare fundraising world, when you think about what's similar and different compared to the strong alma mater affinity and the process that you all have at Clemson, what would you highlight as just being some of the similarities and differences?
I think it was key. It was the mission of the organization at the time. We still had nuns walking around the halls. And so I believe in the mission of Clemson University and everything it did. While I was at St. Francis had my heart. It had my commitment, because I knew what these nuns and this health system was doing for our community truly made a difference. So that was key for me. And the other, it's about leadership, right? I had great leaders in administration there at the hospital, great board members that wanted to see this fundraising program or this development program grow for St. Francis. So I had great people around me who were committed to seeing this organization go to the next level. So those things that moved me. And again, it was a professional challenge to say, what can I do next? So it was best move for me career-wise, and best move for me personally.
Thank you for sharing. And so 11 years, really good run in a sector with a fair amount of turnover. You decide to go try something new. Tell me more about the consulting experience, when you started, what you were focused on, and some of the highlights and lessons learned.
Well, at St. Francis, we just finished our first capital campaign ever. And I think we raised $3.1 million. And back then, that was a lot of money for a community hospital. So we're great, very successful. And I think I got to the point there to say, what's next for me professionally to grow? What's my next challenge? So the firm that we used to help us with our campaign, again, Corporate Development, located in Charleston, South Carolina. And she always said, hey, if you're ever ready to get into this world, let me know. And it took about 1.5 years. And I said, I think I'm ready for it. And so I got to Corporate Development with June Bradham, the CEO. It was her and one or two others. And we said, let's try growing this. And so that was one of the key things I took on, was help grow the company, where when I first got there, we're basically South Carolina. Almost every hospital in South Carolina worked with our firm, and most of the ones in North Carolina. And then we just grew, and we said, let's grow this business. So next thing you know, I said, let's grow. And I was down in Florida or Virginia Beach, and we just grew the company. So it was a great time of growth there, and brilliant people working together. I had a tremendous leader in June, and we built a great little consulting firm. And I would put the work that we did up with any one of these bigger names that we'd go against. So it was a great run, and that was about a 3.5-year run. But learned a lot. Really learned how to better manage volunteer leadership as you're getting into a campaign, and the part of managing campaigns and the highs and lows you go through a campaign. So it gave me great experience to get ready to come back to Clemson.
It's been some time, but let's say that I'm the head of development at a hospital at that time that wasn't yet working with you. What was the value proposition? What were the discovery questions? The pain points or solutions that you all brought to bear that really filled that void. And obviously, there's great precedent for consultants to support advancement organizations in a variety of ways. But what was the specific area of expertise that you felt really added the most value to those clients?
We developed a booklet, or I'll call it a tool, that we called the Mint Ask, corporate development, and it was called the Mint Ask. And it really looked at how do you take a program to building a solid case for support, right? How do you get hospital administration and community leaders to buy into that? And then really, what's the role of that campaign cabinet or that foundation board to execute that? And so we hosted conferences all over that really talked about how we grew this program. So I think it was the tools that we put together to start, again, build your case, and then how do we execute it? And we just followed it. So we brought the science to these hospitals of follow this path and you'll be successful. And then we added the art to it. So it was the tool we put together called the Mint Ask.
I love it. Sounds right up my alley, and appreciate you sharing. So tell me about, after the 3.5 years, what was the next stop?
I was very fortunate where the vice president of advancement at Clemson at the time called me and said, will you come home? And at that time, the alumni position was open. And I really thought, do I want to come back and lead the Alumni Association? And I really thought about it. That's where I grew up. I have a passion for alumni relations. And I said, at the time, I was currently serving as the volunteer president of the Alumni Association. So, man, I would have had to take my hat off and run it as a staff member and do that. And I said, thank you so much for that. But I think my passion and the challenge I have is more on the development side. And so about 2 months later, he called back and said, my head fundraiser has retired. Funny story. He left alumni work and went back to healthcare, And so now I'm going back from healthcare and come back to alumni. And he said, let's brainstorm this of how we can make this work. And I said, if we could bring alumni and development closer together and not be in silos, because I'm a believer, an alumni association with purposeful engagement leads to good philanthropy, good investment back to the institution. So we brought those two together, and I oversaw both of those programs under my VP of advancement. And that's when we started, getting the Alumni Association more comfortable with having philanthropy as part of their culture, and supporting and tying into development. We all sat around the same table together. So that was a big step.
Can I ask when that was, Brian?
That was I've been here 16 years. So we're looking at about, my first year was like, what did I get into? So we're talking about anywhere about 14, 15 years ago, we really started to pull those two together.
Which feels to me like you must have been on the early wave of what has become sort of industry best practice, where there's been a strong trend of integration strategically or structurally between alumni associations and development. But that wasn't the case 15 years ago for the most part. And so it sounds like there was strong alignment in the various leaders, but I could see that being a little bit contentious as well, depending on, the personalities and turf and, history and all of that. So tell me about how seamless was it?
I would say it was a slower go than we thought. The one thing that we did have going for us is, many years ago, our alumni association oversaw our annual fund. And then prior to me, it left the Alumni Association, came more on the development side. So there were some people on the board still that understood the annual fund component. So when we said, guys, we've got to come back together, I think there was some easy buy-in, but what took time was how do you programmatically get there? How do you get the engagement officer in the Alumni Association think of just having a Clemson Club meeting and walking away after it's over and say it was a good event, to having a purposeful event? And then how do you measure, and what's the follow-up from that? Because again, professionally, I believe an alumni association is about warming the doors so you can grow that relationship and people can get more involved and support the institution in, whether it's time, talents, and treasures. So it's been a long path, and I would say the last 6 years, the board truly, in its strategic plan, is just putting the stake in the ground about the importance of philanthropy. They bought into it, but now it's part of their strategic plan, which I think is a big step.
You've said purposeful engagement twice. I'd be curious to know an example of engagement that is not purposeful, but perhaps commonplace in the sector. Mm-hmm. And then an example maybe that you've seen of really effective purposeful engagement. Mm-hmm. What doesn't work, what does?
I think it's the same event. Okay. So if you're going into a city and you want to have an alumni event, and so you need to go in. Who did we invite? We invited all alumni. And instead of just going and say, oh, we're going to, let me guess, we're going to Austin, Texas, right? And I'm going to bring the president to an alumni event there. First off, don't make that decision in silo for an alumni event. Where's the donor event beforehand? Where's the donor event afterwards, or the corporate connection that needs to be taken afterwards? So one, how are you inclusive with that event? You shouldn't have a siloed event at all. So I think that's number one. And then what's the messaging? The messaging needs to be relevant to where we are in the campus, whether we're in a campaign or for promoting scholarships. It's more about, we got to say more than just being there. We need to say your participation is important. We're very proud at Clemson. Alumni participation, we continue number 3 in the country for top public. So we're proud of that. So we got to continue to charge our alumni to help keep that tradition of alumni giving going. So I think that's it in the planning aspect of it. But then the follow-up, and we're not there yet, but the follow-up is who attended? How does that help you rate folks, engagement scores?
Yep.
How do you identify people? When I was in the alumni business 85 years ago, I sat with the alumni development director every time I came back from a trip. And I said, you got to meet Brent, man. He just bought a house in Newport. He's just buying a brand new motorhome. You guys got to go see him. That was informal. How do we now have these events and at the end, here are potential people that we should talk to? So that's what we call it purposeful. And the current president of the alumni board is all about it, which is great.
I love it. It reminds me of a conversation I had with Steve Hall, who used to lead alumni relations at Boston University. He was at University of Houston previously. And we just talked about that journey, right? Let's say that 100 people show up to homecoming and they all register online, and they're vastly different people. Some are very high net worth, thinking about estate planning. Some are consistent annual fund supporters who have now elevated higher into their careers. And some are recent graduates who are, just trying to pay the bills and get settled in their new place. And what is the experience afterwards for those individuals? And I think all too common, the experience is identical. You come to the event, you all registered, you leave, and you all get the thank you email, right? Mm-hmm. Or you get the standard message that everybody got. And I think what you're just describing and what we believe strongly in is, how do you start to create really data-driven post-engagement follow-up actions so that you can route the engaged constituents with a certain profile over to planned giving? You can route the next folks who, set of people who, have maybe never received a visit, but they've been consistent supporters, over to a discovery officer. And then maybe everybody else gets more of a mass marketing one-to-many, because you can't go personalized, truly to every single individual. But it does seem like we've still got a ways to go in general. And frankly, I think that what you described you were doing early in your career of just looking at the list and, coming up with a game plan is still not happening in a lot of cases. Today, in spite of all the technology and all the systems and CRM and all these things that have been invested in, that is not going to create the strategy that you just described.
And to be honest, we're not totally there. We know where we want to go. So we have our new software system. Everyone's asking for good data. Well, you got to put it in first. Right. You change the culture that says everyone's responsible for putting the data in. And in the old days, I remember we used data to measure the success of development. Right. Today, we need to use data to help build our plan. Make mission effective. So data is a lot more important than it used to be. And so, but from the alumni, we got to stop putting that in. And again, we're not perfect, but at least culturally, that's where we're headed.
Yep. No, it makes sense. And I think, look, starting small and getting it really right for one event is a great place to start. And then, thinking about ways to scale it up from there. And so 16 years, it's a long run in kind of development leadership roles. And I think it's been about 6 or so since you've been in the senior most position. When you think about the before and after for Clemson, or even the way you've seen the advancement world evolve, when you talk to friends in the sector as well, what are some of the biggest changes that you've seen in the last 15 years?
I think our board of trustees, university administration, they're really looking at the return on investment right now. Budgets are tight everywhere. So if I'm going to invest more into our development enterprise, what's the return on investment? And I think they're asking us, are you as efficient and effective as you possibly can be? And we have to show that. So when I came to Clemson 16 years ago, we put our campaign together and we said, here's the plan we think we can get here. As my old boss and I just saying, right? Today, you got to show a lot more data. You got to show a lot more management while streamlined, making tougher decisions now. So I think it's the eyes are upon us because the expectation of increased philanthropy is upon us. And so when 16 years ago, we were probably raising $74 million a year. Last year, we raised $200 million last year. So they've invested in us and they've seen a great return on investment. But if they want to see us go to the next level, they're going to have to see, if I give you this, what are you going to get? What's that return going to be? And when we did that 16 years ago for the first initial investment, we didn't have to show as much. We went in and says, this is the way it works. And they bought off on it. But that doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah. And I'm curious, when you talk about making the case for ROI and investment, you also said you have a passion for alumni relations. And when you think about the spectrum of the advancement world, where there's immediate term ROI versus lifetime level ROI, you might say, well, principal gifts is where you put $1 in and you're going to know exactly within a period of time exactly how much revenue is generated, and you can really talk ROI there. On the other hand, making an investment in alumni relations, which you have a passion for, and it's where you started, sometimes it's hard to be able to draw that direct connection, which means you could over rotate and only invest in frontline staff and nothing else. But that comes at the expense of the experience and the long-term health of the organization. Do trustees get that? Does leadership get that? I mean, how do you think about the balance between, serving your broad population while also absolutely activating every philanthropic dollar possible in the top 3 to 5% of the giving pyramid that is realistically going to contribute a significant portion of any campaign?
Great question. So up front, I'll say I believe in investing in alumni relations and annual giving. And what we've done is we're in the planning phase. You finish a campaign, you're in the planning phase for the next one. But one of the goals that we have that's been approved by our board and by our campaign executive committee during this planning process is that we leave Clemson University with a strong pipeline for future generations. And by that means, I think it hits everything you're talking about. We're not just saying name the colleges. We're not saying build the endowment to this number or routinely get to a certain number with our philanthropic dollars. It's about building that pipeline, because I think everyone who works at Clemson at this time within our division believe we need to leave this better for those who are after us. And so by investing in a strong alumni relations program and a strategic annual fund program and let that go, whoever comes next should have a good pipeline for major gifts and principal gifts when this campaign's over. So I think having that as a goal that's measurable and we're accountable to the board, I think answers to your question why we need to invest in those levels as well. Though we know the top of the pyramid is going to get us there, and we've got a lot of investment there and on major gifts, playing gifts, future gifts, we can't take our eye off of the foundation of what's the future of donors and relationships.
And one of the strong components of broad-based engagement and affinity at Clemson is certainly athletics. It's what led you there. It's not the only reason. There's a lot of other amazing components of the academic experience. But when you think about what has become such a strong athletics brand, where there's such strong athletics affinity, sometimes I've heard that can be a blessing and a curse, because it means there's so much attention in that part of the experience and the identity of the institution that commanding attention for some of the maybe less well publicized or well-known philanthropic initiatives can be a challenge. So I'm sure there must be examples where you're able to build off of just passion and enthusiasm and amazing game day experiences, but then pivot that into priority areas that the donor might not otherwise be aware of.
Yeah, well, I can answer that question in quite a few ways. First off, I personally believe if you have a strong athletic program that does it right, it's a great front porch to your institution.
What does it mean to do it right?
I mean, you play by the rules, your athletes graduate, you're winning. So that's what it means to me. So it was the Wall Street Journal that did an article that looked at universities. They did the grid and said, what schools are really doing this right? That top right corner. So when you saw Clemson up there with Stanford and other great schools, we're doing it right. They're student athletes. And so let's do it right. Let's win on the field, but let's win off the field. So a commitment to the true student athlete. So I think I'm confident Clemson does that. So that can help us. And so one, you can look at a football game when we have 80,000 people, but you also can realize we have a president's suite. Programmatically, how do we use that, in which we highlight faculty and students of the game, we highlight a college of that game. So we're talking academics in that pregame and during the game with our donors and prospects, depending on the college. That's the programmatic that we use. And then we say, now let's watch football. And then when we have hot dog at halftime, how do we carry on those conversations? So when you have a strong athletic program, you gotta use that to strengthen some of your programming for development work around that. Bowl trips, we have one of the best fundraising presidents out there. And whenever we travel to away games, who's he sit with? Who does he have dinner with? And how do we support him in that way? The other example I've seen in my career, if somebody gets to know Clemson through athletics and makes a significant gift there, well, they're going to get closer to the president. They're going to get close to the board of trustees. They're going to get close to the provost, and they get exposed to more areas of the university. And the next thing you know what? I want to help that business program, or I really like the program you're doing for the low part of the state for underserved people. They hear about those, so it broadens it. So I think that's critical. And then third, I'll say the relationship that your university development program has with your athletic fundraising. If you're together, we call it One Clemson, where if you're the primary manager, whether you're assigned in athletics or academics, you got to respect that relationship. And my team in university development, we'll sell gifts to athletics. I don't care. I'm working with somebody yesterday in athletics. We made a call on an individual and he had the relationship. We talked about supporting engineering. So that relationship with your peers down in athletics and on the academic side, if you work together, then it can explode as well. And we're very fortunate to have that good relationship. Not always.
So similar. Yeah. but it sounds like similar alignment to what you've described with the alumni engagement efforts, and really athletics is just another massive way to generate that engagement. You mentioned
we're lucky. We started it all early on. IPTE was the best annual fundraising program, and then Central Development sat down with them and said, "We got to get to the major gifts program here." And I remember the athletic fundraising group said, don't want to hurt the golden goose. Well, when you showed them the data and the importance and the benefits of major gifts, we have one of the best athletic major gift programs around now. But we were all young. We all got in this together. So we're very fortunate that the alumni development and IPTE really decided to grow over the last 10 to 12 years.
Love that. You mentioned President Clements, who I've had the opportunity to meet, incredibly dynamic. And I can imagine that he's a very effective fundraiser. Tell me a little bit. You've worked together for a long time, and I am sure his calendar, any president's calendar, is it's a very competitive space. And how institutions and the team around presidents compete for that space on the calendar, I can't even imagine. But tell me what it was like as you flipped to a more virtual experience like we're having right now, what that meant for a president who, when you're trying to physically get him to this city or that location or this donor meeting, logistically, it's a lot of time, it's money, it's challenge. When you're a Zoom link away from the president, does that help? Or was it maybe not as high impact as I might expect? I'm just curious. Given that you'd worked together so much prior to the pandemic, how you've been able to connect with donors during and coming out of it here.
One is, you're right. We're very fortunate to have an outstanding development president who is always ahead of my team, who's always thinking, what's next? What's next? Hey, we haven't been here. We haven't been there. So he doesn't stop. And he is extremely good, extremely sincere, probably one of the best development presidents, I'll say, that's out there. And he will give the pandemic, he gave us the time we needed to do that trip to Florida, or to say, you've got to go and see this person. If it's strategic, he would make it happen. He also enjoys it. And he, like myself and a lot of us in this business, we get energy when we're with people. And so we're traveling somewhere exhausted, but by the time you meet up with people and it kicks in, there's nobody better. And so we did a lot of that but what we did during the pandemic was we had a lot of these. I mean, he and his wife would host, the socials, at 5:30 during Jim and Beth, just for an update. And people would sit and they just have, depending on the groups, just have conversations. How's your grandkids? We kept them in touch. And then he gave the spiel. Other times we'd have donors and prospects and volunteers together to hear about our vice presidents talk about how we're managing the COVID and how we're doing testing on campus and what's ahead of us, what's scary. So we used Zoom a lot to stay in touch with that base of top donors, our top leaders. We also used it brilliantly on the alumni side on engaging and having faculty members and students constantly doing Facebook a couple times a week for the broader alumni base. So no, we use social media quite a bit, but now we're back to doing, right. We're hosting football games, so we're back on the road, and we're heading up to Pittsburgh in a couple of weeks, and we'll go up a couple of days early and make some visits, and then use the game. Put people sitting with the president will be people that are going to be supporting the business school and engineering.
So when you think about, let's say, 6 months from now, 12 months from now, how much does the work look like it did in 2019 versus more of a blended model? When you think about alumni and regions you were able to reach, to be able to be a Zoom link away with the president, as much as he loves doing it, you can only be so many places at once. But at the same time, you are back on the road. People do want, that more holistic in-person experience. But does it where does it settle out, I guess, based on what you see right now?
I think the power of Zoom's always going to be with us. We have a great alumni base in Texas, West Coast. They were on those Zooms with the president, and they said, we just don't go back there. It's it's a treat for them to come back every other year. And when we were doing Zooms every 3 months, they were sitting on that screen. It was so good to see them. So we can't stop doing it. So that's one. And we had people attending by Zooms that normally don't come back for that dinner or come back for that. So, a football game doesn't attract everybody, or a basketball game. And so we're going to continue to use that as cultivation, but also our donor relations team has really found ways that we're going to use it for, for stewardship. How do we really impactful thank people? I think the tool of Zoom is definitely here to stay. But I'm a people guy. And so I'm happy being on the road and traveling.
Love it. Well said. One of the things that I know you're very proud of is that in a sector where there's constantly being various studies cited about turnover among development professionals, you yourself have set an example by going deep with a couple of different roles throughout your career. But it sounds like your team has tended to stick around a lot longer than normal as well. And I'd love to just know a little bit more about why that is. Is it a specific goal that you had set, or just a unexpected outcome of how things have come together? Just tell me a little bit about that.
We're proud. I think the average, I'll say, lifespan of a development of one shop is 2.6 years, 2.7. Well, our average is about 6.6. And we've moved out 2 people who've been here 30 years. We are proud of that. But why? I think it's an exciting time to be at Clemson. We're selling a very good product. We got great leadership and a great vision. So that's number one. So I think people are enjoying that. 2, we work very hard. Salaries are always the issues. I can make more here, make more there. But outside saying, I just want to be a fundraiser, how else can I grow in this institution? So both within our division, we find ways to include people to serve on committees. Do you want to help us build a mentoring program? How do you want get involved without being just that fundraiser? As an institution, we have leadership development programs that our president's office does. The president has a program called the Presidential Leadership Institute, in which we put our rising stars in there. I've put 4 in there. 3 of them have been promoted all within the university to an associate VP in one division, or moved up to an executive director. I have 2 that moved up to executive directors in my division. So we believe in investing in the people. I think that's critical. So we're very, very proud of that. And when I talked about the goal of the campaign, building that pipeline, some of us may not be here for the future campaign, but we're all committed to making this shop be the best it can be. I mean, we all came here when it was a small little fundraising program, small little development program, and we're proud of what we've built, but we want it to be the best it can be so Clemson can be the best it be. And when we do leave, we want to say we left them a good little shop.
Well said. And I know that you're not doing this alone. You've got a strong team that you've built. You just mentioned the importance of leadership development. Tell me about some of the folks on your team who have been with you or have recently joined, who are some of the key lieutenants, if you will.
Yeah, my 2 associate vice presidents, Giovanna King's been here 30 plus years. Boy, she really knows the art of fundraising. So she has those long-term relationships. And as you follow her career, you realize this is development. It's not fundraising. Then I'm missing.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
Fundraising, to me, I think political fundraising, give me my money, give me my money, give me my money. Development, you build a relationship with somebody and you're part of that journey in that relationship to Clemson. So it's from when Brian O'Rourke made his first annual gift, said, I'm going to be a high-end annual donor at 1,000, to moving me to create my family endowment, to say, I want to make that ultimate gift. To be part of that journey is pretty special. So Javon has been there. Then Missy Ryan, my other AVP, Missy Ryan Penland, very well connected in the industry. Again, she leads all the fundraisers in the college and the units, has really brought structure to that program where we're seeing efficiency and effective there. Tremendous fundraiser, but she's a great executor for me there as well. And then also my leadership team is someone from our athletic fundraising. sits on my team. And so we're in constant communications. Then my executive director of the Alumni Association is critical. So if I look at my senior table, they've all but one's been there for over 8.5 years.
Very impressive. Thank you for sharing. You've mentioned a couple of mentors along the way. I am curious, when you think about peers, other leaders in the sector who you've built relationships with, it can be a pretty tight-knit community. I mean, who are some of the folks out there that are on your short list when you have a question or want to brainstorm something?
Oh, I'm good friends with the ACC. If you look at the organization EAB, they put up great data, so a lot of good connections there. You can pick up from my friend at Florida State. Those who have built programs and hit roadblocks. So I think, and especially I'll say through AB, we've really learned to share a lot and be open. Then I mentioned June Bradham, starting a consulting firm, was a true mentor. My alumni director, when I first got into this business, Debbie DeBose, she was just a fabulous. So, and then I'll say right now, our current president of the university, he's a true leader who expects a lot from you, but he also is right there with you getting it done. And so, you can set high expectations, but as a leader, you better go with the group and be with them to get it done.
Brian, tell me a little bit about, you just concluded $1 billion campaign. I know you're really proud of that, but at the same time, you get a day to celebrate, and then you're on to the next planning process, which you mentioned. When you think about where the team is today and potential growth opportunities, are you hiring right now? Do you expect to be hiring in the next year or two? You mentioned about making the case for investment and having the data at your disposal to do that. Where do you stand on the team building front right now?
Great question. Right now, our division, we're about 125 people total. We know to build a program to routinely be 200 to 250 million a year. Compared to our peers, we need to grow that. So we're putting a plan together for the university. So we do have growth coming. But going back to Will to Lead, when I came here 16 years ago, we had 9 major gift offices. We could put this whole team in one conference room. And so now we're about 28 development officers with critical professional support team with us, whether that's research, proposal writers, donor stewardship, admins. I think all that is as critical as a good DO. So we've grown. We can't fit into a conference room anymore. But no, we're showing the university that if we want to get here, if last campaign was $1 billion, first university in the country, public university with less than 150,000 alumni to reach $1 billion campaign. If you now want to do a minimum of 1.5 in less time, there's got to be an investment. And so the pandemic hurt us. We lost 1.5 years of investment, but if we want to get there, you better invest in not only more feet in the ground, but we need people to support those development offices. So growth is critical. And so hopefully by mid-December, we'll be posting some jobs, and those who want to come work with a pretty good shop, with a good track record of people that come and stay, start looking at our websites and see what opportunities we'll have come around. But yeah, if we want to go where the university wants to go, investments are critical.
Love it. When you think about the best development officers you've worked with, you mentioned Giovanna, you've worked with others. What are the characteristics that come to mind when you think of those individuals?
Mm-hmm. I'll give you my philosophy first. I think we had a good board member who shared this with me one time. You got to be near, dear, and clear with with your donors. So you need to be near them. You got to stay in touch with them. You got to be part of them. Number 2, you got to be clear. If you're not clear on if I'm going to set up an endowment, how does it work, et cetera. So those are 3 components. So I think a very good development officer, you got to be pretty structured. So you got to be able to be sincere with your donors. You got to listen. And when you leave a meeting, know what your next steps are going to be. And then a key thing is I'm going to follow up on those next steps. I mean, it's pretty basic, but you've got to follow up. So I think you got to near, dear, and clear. Very important. But beyond that is you got to listen. Then you've got to hear what your next steps are, and then move forward. And you've got to drive this. You don't let the donor, because the donor's got a bunch of other things happening in their lives. So what are you doing to that follow? And then once a gift is made, it's your job to make sure the gift is having an impact. So I think those are the best traits of a good development officer.
We talk a lot about the importance of polite persistence. And I think sometimes development officers, or in the sales world, we can feel like we're hounding somebody or we're bothering somebody. But like you just said, people are busy. And if they really aren't interested, they can tell you. You can give them an opportunity to tell you that. But if they're not responsive, it doesn't mean they're not interested. But it's your job to stay near, dear, clear, and politely persistent, which sometimes I think can be uncomfortable, but it's critical.
Yeah, I remember my first fundraising conferences. One, why don't they give? They're not asked. And two, no doesn't mean no, it means not now. And so how do you respect that relationship of where they are and keep it in front of them? So you're right, persistence.
Last question, Brian. You've been doing this for a long time, but you did reference in our interview in advance that you get inspiration from the students. And I can see a scenario where doing what you do on the road, like you are on the go, working with the donor community, it would be easy to get disconnected from the Brian O'Rourke, from those 100 kids from Massachusetts that are there right now, from the current beneficiaries of IPTE scholarships. How do you do that, given how busy you are? And then how do you make sure your team, that it's not just about the visits and the revenue and the big numbers with lots of zeros, but the humans that are being impacted positively? How do you keep your team connected with that student impact story, and then also your donors?
On the broad base, we never have a meeting, a team meeting, or a volunteer meeting, a foundation board, whatever. We always talk about impacts and have a student or faculty member share their story. So we're always in touch with us. And I think for the development officers that work in the college and the units, they're touching it every day. As you move up, you have less time to do that. Personally, what I do is I try to put on my calendar 3 times a month to go and grab lunch with a student that I may have met at a luncheon that said, wow, you're amazing, I want to have lunch with you. Or they are from Massachusetts, or a friend of a friend says, will you look out for somebody? So I try to do it 3 times a month. And now that COVID's over, I'm back picking that up and doing it again. And I leave there saying, that's why we do what we do.
Wow.
And then my wife and I, what people did for me when I came south, it's like, you need some place just on a Sunday afternoon to watch a movie and do laundry in a real washing machine instead of a laundromat, come to the house. So Amy and I, same philosophy. If you just want to get away for a night or a weekend, we got plenty of room. You can downstairs, you can watch TV down there. We'll do your laundry. So show that Clemson DNA of the Clemson family. So that, along with forcing myself to make sure I'm connecting with students, is what gives me my energy.
Really well said, Brian. And I think everybody listening, that is something, talk about copying and stealing everything. That is something that everybody could do, whether it's 3 times a month, once a month. I'm sure when you do that, it also allows you to more authentically share those experiences with the donors that you're meeting as well, or selectively to bring those students in when appropriate. So I think that is just, nobody's shared that with me before. I think that's an awesome tactic that anybody could start doing next week.
Yeah, like I took time last week to tour. We're building a chapel. We're finally getting a chapel on our campus. And so last Wednesday, I said, I'm going to take 40 minutes and walk through that chapel. And that whole program is possible because of private support. And I was walking, what impact is this going to have for our students for generations to come? And so I did that on a Wednesday. Next thing you know, at Thursday, I'm standing in front of a group of volunteers with the Alumni Association, our board of trustees. And I said, why do we do what we do? I just walked through that building, and the people that made that happen, every student at Clemson for generations to come are going to sit back and benefit from that. And again, that's why we do. We want to give them a better experience than what we had when we went there.
I love it, Brian. Such good energy, great examples. This time has flown by. I can't thank you enough for sharing a window into your world with our audience. And I would encourage folks to reach out to Brian if you want to get connected formally or informally. And just thank you so much, Brian. I wish you the absolute best and look forward to continue to stay in touch.
Oh, same here. Thanks so much for the opportunity. Yeah, O'Rourke at Clemson.edu, and I'd love to connect with anybody. If myself or better yet, members of my team can help you be successful, we're always willing to do that and be partners with anybody to continue to keep making a difference at their institutions.
Great parting thoughts, Brian. And so with that group out there, we're going to conclude just a couple of New Englanders here on the Race podcast. Thanks, everybody.
Go Tigers.
Go Tigers.